regarded as being, in my opinion, one of the greatest musical artists, one of the most well-known musical artists um, of all time. And if we study his life, if we study his musical catalog, we'll understand why King David was even a foundational pillar for artists that we tout today as grandiose like Michael Jackson, right? And so here it is in the book of First Samuel, right? We see the introduction of this guy named David, who we'll come to know as King David. But technically, when God introduces him in the scriptures, he introduces him to us by way of his anointing by the prophet Samuel as the next king of Israel after the previous slash sitting king was basically kicked from his spot because he disobeyed God. So we see that David is chosen. This is around First Samuel chapter 16. And so David is chosen. David is already held in some type of regard as a skillful musician. That's one. And I've gone through this list a couple of times, but First Samuel chapter 16 names him as a skillful musician. Um, he is courageous. He's well spoken, good looking, all the things. And so this is David has a good reputation about himself, right? David is solid, right? And so as a solid guy, David is brought in after his anointing as king to play his instrument and utilize his artistry for the sitting king of Israel, because that king now has an evil spirit that is tormenting him. And David, being one who is skilled, but also one whom God is with, right, has the ability to play his music and actually cause for the evil spirit to lift off of Saul, right? And so we see this historical account take place, but then we see that David um, is in First Samuel chapter 17. He is going back and forth between the palace basically and the sheepfold. He's still, you know, going back home to be a shepherd. And so he's going back and forth he's traveling between the palace and home to shepherd the sheep. And so we see the account of Goliath. We know, I will know the story of David and Goliath. And David is bringing his brother's lunch from home. And Goliath is taunting the army, and they are frozen in their tracks out of fear. And David is literally like, "Hey, yo, what's happening? Who this fool?" Like literally, David's like, who is this? What does this even? What does this even do?" And from there, he's like, "All right, I'm gonna take care of it." Basically, I'm paraphrasing a lot of it, but you can go read. Um, he's like, "I'm gonna take care of it." Now, you're like, "All right, dude, you said this is gonna help me as a musical artist. How does this help me as a musical artist?" Because when you look at David's resolve, right? When you look at David's resolve, you see that David had one, he had a good reputation already. He was known for his artistry, even though it doesn't say that David was an artist that was like out here just doing a bunch of like just he wasn't out here doing shows and doing da da da. Da. But David had a reputation for being a solid musician, a skillful musician, but also he had all these other attributes, right? Secondarily, though, again, you could tell that he was a man who God was with. They knew this, and so his resolve was, and you can see this in the conversation about Goliath. Why would I stand in any other posture against somebody who's trying to defy the armies of the living God? Right? He's like, "Hey, this Philistine ain't nothing, dog." And Saul gets wind of it, and he tells Saul like, "I'm gonna handle it." And Saul like, you can't do that." And he's like, because Saul's basically like, you don't have experience in this, and he's been fighting forever. And David is like, "Yeah, but I keep sheep." And in keeping sheep, I've protected the sheep from lions and bears, and so with my basically with my bare hand, I I handle these things, right? He said, I've been a shepherd tending sheep for my father. Whenever a lion or a bear come and took a lamb from the flock, I'd go after it, knock it down, and rescue the lamb. If it turned on me, I'd grab it by the throat, wring its neck, and kill it. Lion or bear, it made no difference. I killed it. And I'll do the same to this Philistine. Like the resolve was, here it is. There's nothing too hard for God. And the resolve was, I'm gonna go to bat for that which has been given to me. Right? I've resolved that what I've been given to steward, I'm going to steward, and God is going to help me with that because God gave it to me, right? So you're like, okay, this is cool, but again, musically, how does this help me? Because your resolve, lifestyle wise, is going to be your resolve musically. You don't ever see an account if you read through the story of David's life and the historical account of David's life within First Samuel, Second Samuel, and all that. You never see where he like stowed away to write these psalms because we know David also to be, I think he's a writer of the majority of the psalms. um Maybe. It says at least 73 to 75 of them, so a good half. Ain't that right? Wouldn't that be a good half? But you never see him stow away to write these psalms. You never see the actual, like, the scriptures say, and David went and sat down and wrote a new song necessarily. I'm not saying it never says he wrote a song, but you don't necessarily see every account where he wrote a song. But what you can see is that within David's Psalms, you can tie them to particular accounts that are throughout his historical account of his life, right? Um, Here it is. And within his Psalms, you can see his resolve as well. So here it is. David says in Psalm 14, he says, the fool says in his heart, there is no God, right? They are corrupt. They do abominable deeds. There is none who does good. What kind of song is this? It's a Psalm of David. Because David, where's the format? It don't have to be one. All right. It says Yahweh looks down from heaven. It says the Lord in this, but Yahweh looks down from heaven on the children of man to see if there are any who understand, who seek after God, right? They all have turned aside. Together they have become corrupt. There is none who does good, no, not even one. Have they no knowledge? All the evildoers who eat up my people as they eat bread and do not call upon Yahweh. They are in great terror, for God is with the generation of the righteous. You would shame the plans of the poor, but Yahweh is his refuge, right? So you see, oh, that salvation for Israel would come out of Zion when Yahweh restores the fortunes of his people. Let Jacob rejoice, let Israel be glad. I want to go back to verse 6 in that you would shame the plans of the poor, but Yahweh is his refuge. You even see here the twinge for dealing with how other people deal with other people. Like you see David's resolve about life in his songs, right? His songs were written from his resolve. And when you have a particular resolve about life, hey everybody, when you have a particular resolve about how life should be, like you write, you compose music from your worldview. And depending on what your worldview is how all of that is going to come out. And depending on what you're concerned about being seen as will determine sometimes what you'll write about, right? David literally just wrote. He wrote out of the fullness of his authenticity, the fullness of who he was. And he didn't necessarily care too much about the opinions of men or the opinions of people because he knew what he was writing. He was writing, here it is, as unto God. Now he knew people would hear it and he knew it would impact people. But at the end of the day, it glorified God, right? And he wrote about a lot of things. He wrote about. Let's see. Let's pick another one. Um, and I'm just going through some of these. Here it is. He says in Psalm 55, "Give ear to my prayer, O God, and hide not yourself from my plea for mercy. Attend to me and answer me. I am restless in my complaint, and I moan because of the noise of the enemy, because of the oppression of the wicked. For they drop trouble upon me, and in anger they bear a grudge against me. My heart is in anguish within me. The terrors of death have fallen upon me. Fear and trembling come upon me, and horror overwhelms me." This sounds like anxiety to me. This sounds like a bunch of fear and anxiety, right? It sounds like David is crying out to God for help, which is a way. Here it is. Again, we don't see a lot of accounts. Now, I don't know what they say this psalm is tied to, um, possibly, but as far as the time in his life, but we can tell that it's tied to a particular season in his life. Now, this could be him running from Saul. This could be him facing something else. I don't know, but you can see at the heart of it, he had a recognition of who God is. Here it is near the end of this. Now, he does all of this, right? He does all of this at the beginning. He says in 12, I'm just running through it a little bit. "For it is not an enemy who taunts me, then I could bear it. It is not an adversary who deals insolently with me, then I could hide from him. But it is you, a man, my equal, my companion, my familiar friend," right? "We used to take sweet counsel together within God's house. We walked in the throng. Let death steal over them. Let them go down to Sheol alive. For evil is their dwelling place in their heart. But I call to God, and Yahweh will save me," right? Then one of my favorite parts of this whole chapter, and a lot of people's favorite part, is verse 22 of of the 55th Psalm. And it is, "Cast your burden on Yahweh, and he will sustain you. He will never permit the righteous to be moved," right? So the resolve of David is present no matter what. There is a resolve, like even all that hoopla at the beginning, and it's real time processing, and the resolve is that, but Yahweh gonna take care of it. God gonna take care of it. I'm cool. Huh? David, you just did all this at the beginning, like, "God help me, oh my God, I'm in despair, blah, 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 blah." And then you're like, "But God gonna do it. God gonna do it." It's like, yo, what? But that is the resolve of David. And you got to realize that your resolve about life, and again, like I said, your worldview, your resolve there will determine how your songs are written, how your songs are composed, how your songs are ultimately presented, right? It will determine how you show up as an artist, what you believe about you, what you believe about God, what you believe about people and the world around you, right? All of that is going to show up. And David helps us to navigate in a few ways. Okay, so I'm gonna pull some principles out, and then I'm gonna get off of here. Okay, so I wanna dig the first principle out of First Samuel chapter 17. Right, David teaches us that private preparation precedes public performance. I know it can sound a little whatever packaged, but he does. So when he talks about how he in private protected the sheep from lions and bears, that prepared him for the fight with Goliath. Okay. Now, well, the next thing that happens is he had a purposeful positioning or posture, and that led to a perfectly executed performance. David knew why he was showing up to the fight. He knew who he was showing up to the fight for, right? He knew in whose strength and in whose name he was showing up to the fight. He knew God was with him in the fight, and he wasn't just picking a fight. He was defending the integrity of the standard of God with the army of Israel, right? And ultimately, he was standing up in God's name. right? So he had a purposeful posture and positioning, and it led to a perfectly executed performance. How does this translate to you? When you stand on the stage, when you go to record music, when you navigate your musical production and composition process, right? You have to be purposeful in your intention. You have to be intentional, right? In your execution, you have to know what you're showing up to do, who you're showing up to do it for, unto what end, basically, this is supposed to be done. So whether it be one song, whether it be a whole series of songs, like it's a whole album or something, no matter what it is, whatever you're showing up to do, even if it's like a little live performance, you have to be postured in purpose, purposeful posture, right? And so you have to know why you're there. You have to know to what end. And again, like, how does this, here it is, how does this glorify God at the end of the day? How does this, um, I'd say protect the integrity because God doesn't need protecting necessarily, but how does this help um, people see God in a good light, right? Maybe I'll use that word, purpose. And like, do you know that God is with you in this performance? Do you know, as you're setting your intention, are you allowing, what are you allowing to govern you in your performance, right? And once you set the purpose of it, you can go into it and actually have a perfectly executed performance. Did I say that there will be no technical issues? I'm not saying there will be no technical issues. I don't know. Stuff goes wrong all the time. But you can have a perfectly executed performance because the execution of a performance perfectly has nothing to do with situational perfection or situational um, flawlessness, if you will. It doesn't mean that there's no trouble. It doesn't mean that there's no hiccups. It means that you did what you intended to do when you stepped on that stage. It means that you did what you intended to do when you got in that booth. It means when you got up and stepped into that microphone, you did what you intended to do and your target was hit. Perfectly executed performance. David does this with Goliath. David doesn't miss. David hits the giant right on the head. Perfectly executed performance. All right. And the bonus thing I want to include about David is, and the principle I want to pull out is that a a clear, it sounds the same, um, but a clearly defined relationship with God will lead you into a clearly defined resolve about life, about purpose, about your musical artistry. Your relationship with God will be the root of who you are as a musical artist. It will define your message. It will define your mission. It will define. It will give you language for the people that you're supposed to reach. It'll help you define your path as an artist. God will give you and lead you into what it is you're supposed to be doing, who it is you're supposed to be doing it for, outside of doing it as unto Him, what people that you will reach for Him, right? In His name. Makes sense? So, yeah, David has a lot to teach us. I could do this in one way, shape, or form probably every day. But David is our example in this regard. I think this is one of the examples that God left us as musical artists, the psalmist David, because at the end of the day, our responsibility as Christian musical artists is that of psalmistry, I believe. I believe that God is actually like highlighting and, dare I say, like raising up and training up psalmists in this hour. Those who will write from a resolve. They will compose from a particular resolve. They will perform from a particular resolve. They will sing and play instruments and do the whole nine. And their artistry will be revolving around their relationship with him and life lived with him. That's what I was trying to get to earlier about David. You don't see him pull away to write the songs necessarily all the time when the historical account of his life is given, but you can tell that those accounts shaped his music. It shaped the thing at the time. However, the circumstances didn't change his resolve. His relationship with God gave him language for the current circumstances. And we feast on those lyrics based when we're reading Psalms, we're reading lyrics. We're reading them like teachings and we're teaching from them, but we're reading song lyrics. And I wanna declare this, if I may. I wanna you know kind of pull this out of that in the same way that we pull literal teachings out of what are really lyrics. I mean, whole like they pieces of doctrine are built from David's lyrics. The way that people believe and certain stuff that people believe about God comes from these lyrics that David wrote. These are lyrics. In that same way, that's how important your music is. Some people will hear your music and will know the truth about God through it. They'll know how to process life in a godly way. They'll know how to process pain in a godly way, how to process joy, how to process, through relationships, love, and heartbreak, and XYZ in a way that actually pleases God. And they'll learn. They won't just enjoy, they'll be educated. They won't just listen, they'll learn. You know what I mean? It won't just be something that's sonically pleasing, although it will be, but it'll be spiritually edifying. So I encourage you, study the life of David. We may do some more deeper dives into David because um, I really want to speak to the reality of psalmistry in musical artistry, like you as a musical artist, especially singer songwriters and stuff like that. I want to specifically speak to how important producers to like be making like all of that. I think all of musical artistry, if you're in it, you have psalmist um, responsibility. But we'll get into the fullness of that and what that means and how that tracks out um, as the days go. So I'll see you guys on the next vid. And until next time, please, my friend, stay inspired. All right. Peace.